Voilà, vous avez Mounia Areski, présidente, fondatrice de Afric'Artech. Pour vous souhaiter la bienvenue. Mounia, les masterclass démarrent avec Liam Vries qui vient du Zimbabwe. Donc, il a fait un long voyage et vraiment, on va parler de blockchain et d'NFT. Donc, merci. Mounia.
Merci à vous pour votre présence et merci à Liam Vries qui a accepté notre invitation pour venir animer cette masterclass importante, donc blockchain et NFT. Vous allez beaucoup apprendre pendant cette session. Il va partager avec vous son expertise, tous ses acquis pour pouvoir justement connaître un peu plus c'est quoi, parce qu'on se pose beaucoup de questions et là, vous allez avoir les réponses qu'il faut. N'hésitez pas à participer, n'hésitez pas à poser des questions pour mieux apprendre. C'est une session interactive, donc essayez de discuter, de parler, de participer surtout. Je vous fais confiance, je sais que vous en voulez et bravo, bon courage et bon courage aussi à Liam Vries pour sa session. On peut applaudir Liam Vries.
Il est en train de préparer les derniers. Voilà. Merci.
Bon courage.
On a avec nous un artiste aussi, Liam. We also have an amazing artist, international artist with us. Paulin Bédou is there. You know, he came to assist to your masterclass.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining. I gave a little bit of questions. If I'm talking too fast, just like raise your hand and just do like a little bit of a wave. But I'm going to be going through like blockchain basics and a little bit of an ideation about you as a creative rather than anything else. So I really liked how they pronounce my surname, but in other parts of the world, it's Vries, like fries. So my name is Liam Vries, but commonly known as Vintage Mozart. Majority of the people do know me as the founder of the African NFT community. I was also the founder of AN Collective, which is a subsidiary, and a founding member of Cyberbot DAO. I'm pretty sure if you look on the internet, we were one of the most influential African groups in Web3 between the years of 2021 to 2023. And the more you learn about the blockchain and Web3 in particular, why I'm using these terms is it's more about a community-centric thing rather than you going on the internet and trading. So this is, I hope you enjoy my presentation. Sorry for not having a clicker. Okay. So, for all of you that are in the audience, you're wondering your positions in life. I'll just talk about this, like who is this for? Now, my main target of, I'm very, very blessed to be doing this, but I always wanted to speak to a creative because the main reason why I got into Web3 was mainly for democratization. I come from a country in Zimbabwe, and you could say we're democratic in our own way, but there's freedoms that are taken away from us. And this is what I'm thinking about the future. Whenever you're being hyper surveyed or monitored, you always need to think, what is digital sovereignty? So we're going to ask ourselves, um, going into it. So the masterclass, like what we're going to cover, feel free so you can keep track and you can make borders. I'm going to specifically talk about these topics, but I will go to the side and navigate and talk about the Ubuntu Blockchain Union. So this is something that we're founding after the African NFT community and AIM curated. We needed to have something that was more substantial and having Africa to the world. We've already onboarded over 30,000 people onto Web3, but the main issue was keeping people in Web3, keeping the interest. There's so many limitations, and every single African country, and in fact, every country in the world, it's user specific. So where I come from, like Zimbabwe, electricity was a very, very, very big problem for people going on to onboard. So when we started onboarding, we were using apps like Clubhouse, and as we advanced, we got into Twitter, and now we're getting to the stage of Discord and getting people the idea of getting into a Discord server, why you are there at a server. A common analogy of what you'll learn today is like, if you're going to be selling, what are you selling? Especially like in the blockchain, that's the most important thing as a creative. And this does go to writers, if you are in here, don't feel out of place, journalists, because this data does apply to you people as well. Right, so the keywords that we're going to be focusing on today are tool, and the green are where is our goal. Now, always remember, every single time I am mentioning this, these are just tools. Like, we shouldn't fearmonger one another into thinking that this is going to harm us. It's what you do with the technology. That's the most important part about it. So our key focus is recognition, protection, and sustainability. Now, valorization, that's a very, very big word. We don't need to go down into that. But if we had to go into recognition and protection. Now, I promised myself while I was going to do this, I was not going to prepare myself for the questions, determining on the audience and seeing how people are paying attention. When it comes to recognition, the most important thing you need to know about the blockchain is it's a receipt that cannot be changed. Once it's minted, it cannot be altered. So if someone claims to have minted or drawn a piece in 2020, the blockchain does not lie. You cannot re-upload metadata, you can't do that. Once it's there, those mistakes are permanent. The only way you can get rid of an item is by sending it to a burn address. So every single thing you create should be intentional. This is even worse than your digital footprint. This is not like a tweet. This is you putting your knowledge on the internet and you're preserving it. Like this is you as a person and what you're leaving behind. If you go and look at like if you go and look at like Egypt, hieroglyphics are a perfect example of blockchain because a much of their culture was preserved and their stories, and we still get to research about them. So if you had to look at a real case example, start looking on the continent, cave paintings, all of those things. The earliest forms of art was preservation. It's always within us. Even if you go to European places or South American places, that is human nature by telling the story because our job is to make sure to protect the future generations. So for me, when I came into the blockchain, we're talking about 2018. And this was not for NFT purposes, this was for money. I was in a situation where I just come out of college and did not know what I was going to do in life. Like everyone kind of goes through that little bit of a perspective. What is the next move? Crypto was going around, but I came across a tweet from Osinachi. He's the first ever blockchain artist from Nigeria, and you should get to know that name. He became a pioneer for so many people because he didn't give up selling his work for pennies, dollars. But then it resulted into now, if you go and look him up, he's one of the most famous, selling for thousands and being in museums. But that's where you go into being sustainable. So the sustainability wasn't about the system, it is about you as a person. Are you rigid? Do you actually know yourself whether you can go and do this? Because that's what pre-planning comes, because failure is always feedback. That's what you must remember. That's the most important thing that I can tell you today. Don't look at it as something boring, but it's just feedback from people. Right. So, I'm going to let you guys read this question, and if anyone, I'm going to go briefly explain these things, and I'm not going to use technical knowledge so that you can understand. So, I wanted to list down questions while using Ubu. So, with the Ubuntu Blockchain Union, we developed something by using world tools to go and teach people. So, if you go to like the Instagram, the first 3 pinned tweets show you how to get a wallet, how to put money in your wallet, and how to get onto the blockchain. That is all done in 30 steps. But the first questions is what is an NFT? So I'm pretty sure if you go on the internet, you'll see it's a non-fungible token. But what does non-fungible mean? It is one of one. It is an asset. It is like, picture this microphone being attached, and that's how it is. That's the NFT and the subject. So if you, sorry, I have to use myself as an example. If you go to like the far right there, all those screens, that was like my work. If I wanted to present them on the blockchain as an NFT, I have 2 options. I can either put them as an edition, the same way you would do prints in real life. But imagine a one of one, that only one human being can own this, and it is a digital artifact. And I know the question that's going in your mind, someone can screenshot it. They own a screenshot. They don't own the piece. Ownership is the key thing. That's where the intelligence part comes about it. Like, do you actually own the item? If you go into why NFTs are important, and what is it, currently right now, are there any gamers here? I'm looking at the young gentleman. Do any of you play FIFA games, anything? PlayStation? Yeah, okay, maybe wrong audience. So if you go and look at the gaming industry, currently people are streaming games. You don't even own the license to the actual game. It can just get removed. Now, do you think that's fair? We've watched this happen with DVDs, and now we're in the era of Netflix where television can be changed. But what happens if the item can't be changed? That's the key thing that you're buying, provenance. Now, now what is the blockchain? So this is the ledger that actually shows every single thing that is there. Authenticity is something that is hard to describe, or even accountability. If you had to put into a situation on a real world situation of the blockchain and NFTs. Imagine you're a government and you get to see what they spend their money on. You actually get to see where it is. Every single person can read that. Now, are governments willing to have that level of transparency? It really, really depends where you are in the world. But that's the whole goal. So when you get into like what blockchain and NFTs, they're interlinked with one another because on the blockchain, obviously you have DeFi, you have trading, and you have everything. But our main focus today is on non-fungible tokens, and I'll keep repeating myself so we don't drift on the topic, so that you don't ask yourself this question: how is this useful to me, and how can I monetize this? But there is value. You'll be creating value in yourself in particular, which leads us into minting. The easiest way to explain minting is it comes from the term banks when they make money. You go to a minting press and then it kind of like comes out. So minting is putting your transaction on the blockchain. You pay a gas fee, and which is kind of like the last question. So gas fee is the money you pay for the transaction. You either have proof of stake or proof of work. Think of the gas fee as how Mastercard charges you when you're going into the ATM. It is the exact same thing. So it is repetition of technology, but the technology is just transparent. Everyone can go and see it. You can go on Etherscan and you can see every single person's transaction around the world, every single wallet. Now, as much as it's an invasion of privacy, it does help people. So when I'm talking about what is minting, minting goes in so many forms of, you could either mint art. If you're a journalist here, we have, skipping my paragraph.xyz. That's for the writers. So paragraph.xyz is an example as a software. They enable people in real time to write feedback, to do blogs, and put them on the blockchain. So as much as we have Substack and all of these other ventures, can someone go and mint your piece and say it's mine? All they can do is subscribe to you. So that feeling of ownership of saying, hey, 300 people came and not downloaded my article, but minted it, and you're receiving compensation for it, is incredible. The way the ecosystem has been designed that creatives at any stage or any level can get money through that. But the money is not the thing that we're talking about. We're now in a situation where I have to just segue, like, we design a zine called 16 by 9. The idea of the zine is every single time we go to a curation, we put every single artist, their bio, like how we have this, and then we mint it on the blockchain. We now have a permanent record of every single curation we've gone. Like, it's in my phone. Like, I'll show you as an example as we're going through. But we now know where we've been, how we did it, when we did it, and no one can dispute it because it's on chain. In comparison to how you can see social media apps die down, the blockchain will never die down. It's forever living in its sense, forever living in its sense. And why do we mint? I'm going to give this as like a question after I've explained this. Like, why do you think we mint? Anyone can answer. If no one answers in a few seconds, you can raise your hand. Like, why do you think we mint? Okay, no takers. So, to me, in a real world, why I would mint an NFT. The first ever NFT I minted was on an app called Foundation, which is recently, funny enough, the company is like closing down, has been purchased by Black Dove. But the reason I minted an NFT was I put all my work on Instagram constantly. And when I was putting my work on Instagram, I was hoping a curator, someone was just going to like it, get a DM, get something, like throwing my work into an endless pool of hope. But what about the opportunity of joining people that are purchasing this? There's like-minded people that appreciate art, and digitization of art was inevitable, especially since now we're film, media, the way you go and look at it, like that's what art form is. When we say why we mint, it's also for opportunity. I was talking with one of the artists down there, and we're going to look at things like fashion, medical. Imagine a situation where a doctor in Brazil finds a cure and mints it. 50 years from now, no one's going to change that. The information will be there. We will now know truths. The main issue that we have in being human is discourse. Like, how can someone say they have more knowledge of a topic over me? Like, a perfect example is like myself here. I'm talking to you from experience and how I learned, but I didn't go to university to learn the blockchain. I had to learn the hard way. And the hard way is we have a very, very old saying: you are not there to make enemies, and you're not there to inherit other people's enemies. You're there to build community, or if you're there to make money, that is your option. But Instagram and these other communities, you can all admit when we're on there, these social media platforms are taking from you every single day. And a lot of you will go and cite to YouTube, which is like the highest paying one, but there are conditions for you to get paid. Same with X. With the blockchain and with NFTs and with minting, there's no single condition. If someone purchases your work, you're probably working with a gallery or broker, like example, Super Rare, for example. They take their percentage and then you keep your money and then you deal with your government afterwards if you need to, like some countries don't. Right. So I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what Ubu is and what I've been developing. I've been here long enough and I was wondering when the last millennials were going to care about the blockchain and the next people are, if people can raise hand. How many of you are Gen Z here? Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we have a situation where we're in an era where we have 4 active generations that have witnessed blockchain since the year 2010, Pizzagate and all that kind of stuff. But when we're talking about knowledge, how do we teach people again? We've watched our grandfathers fail, we've watched our fathers, and now you're watching your older brothers fail, telling you about this magical place where you go and put stuff. And it all starts with what we're trying to develop as humanity on chain. With the African NFT community, we turned it into an archive, but the biggest failure of it was becoming a DAO. I don't want to get into talking about a DAO, but the whole idea of Ubu was getting everyone in the masterclass to join so we can ask every single question. People can democratize it. People can answer you from other perspectives. But the biggest failure of it was I was not a leader. I was a founder. I was an artist. I had no intention of leading a group. I had no intention knowing the group was going to grow to thousands of people. And I did not know I was going to have that much responsibility as me. But a key thing of it was it changed me as a person because responsibility makes you rigid. Like, pressure makes diamonds. That's the way you need to think about it. Because it is an uncomfortable thing on what is the actual blockchain. Now, we live in an ADHD era, so the whole thing about Ubu was we're blockchain people. Now, what does that mean? Like, how do you become a blockchain person? And that's the specific reason why you came into the room, because curiosity brought you here. It wasn't a mistake. So, I'll leave this in the background while you guys are reading about like Ubu. So, in essence, I've been talking about Ubu for so long. The idea of Ubu is every single person here is I am because we are. We shouldn't have borders and we shouldn't have anything stopping us. But as I grew in the space and as I grew as an artist and accelerated, it became lonely at the top. You see less and less of your people, you hear less and less of your accents, and you meet more people in generations that don't belong to you. So I myself am a millennial, and I was finding myself, as you climb the ladder, you're in Gen X spaces, but you need to ask yourself about the art space. When did they get their chance? And a lot of them got their chance in NFTs. It all happened at the same time. I think everyone during the pandemic kind of saw the spurge. How do I get onto this? There's so much anxiety. People are making so much money. I don't know if there's artists here. Ismail Saidi, if you guys know him. He's based in Casablanca. He's a photographer. And even Yusuf El Drisi, like famous guys made their name. I'm thinking of a name. It'll come to me in a second. But while all of this was happening, every single community started to diverse because as the African NFT community grew, it became like the African Union. So when you have too many people from too many countries, you have too many opinions, which led us into having sub-factions and subgroups, which led to the rise of the Kenyan NFT community. In my personal opinion, it was the greatest thing that ever happened. Responsibility went off my chest, and communities finally got to teach one another in their local languages, which I find more powerful than having to force people. Like, I kind of feel I've hurt myself by not like speaking French, for example. The audience could have probably changed. And these are some of like the small measures that were like happening. So with Ubu, we decided to make something that is more of Africa to the world rather than incubating us, because we have members from the Caribbean, we have members in South America, and we have members in like America. Now, the key catalyst was I was a curator, being AN curated the foundation of it, but we couldn't find new artists. It's so hard. Like, it's so hard to go over and over again explaining to people how to get on board and everything. And as I get older, I get more tired and I can't be in a position to do that because I have to focus on my art. And as I climb the position, I'm doing things like this, but I'm not in the Discord helping people. And that's the stuff that I used to love to do. But the idea of Ubu is How about you tell one another about your research? You go and you find things like when you know curations are safe, whether you know links are safe, because those are the biggest dangers of blockchain that are going on right now is, will I get scammed? I bet that was going through people's mind. How safe is it? Is it legal? All of these things. And that's what the blockchain union was supposed to be. Well, is going to be, because we're still in the process of onboarding people and it's never going to stop. If I had to tell you with like members right now, we've got like 50 active members, which is far more powerful than having thousands of inactive members. We're having people in group chats talking, but we've closed all the group chats in 2026 to try and divert people to the Discord. The main idea is we've observed social media platforms constantly change. Even, I'm not too sure, is there any social media banned in Morocco? So, like as an example, in Nigeria, they had a Twitter ban, quite big news, one of the biggest Web3 communities. It affected the Web3 ecosystem so bad because a certain percentage, I'm not even talking about numbers, we're talking about a percentage of the space, couldn't communicate, couldn't talk to people, which resulted in collectors not seeing more work, which made them lose interest. So it comes into a ripple effect. Now, what is in the collector's mind? I am going to buy from a certified artist, and they're not going to take a chance on a new person. Because when there's not enough new people coming in, it kind of shows that the interest is kind of slowing down. So they would rather protect themselves by securing with, who am I going to use in this example? Osinachi, the first ever African artist. A powerful artist, but he's climbed the heights of being in the Toledo Museum. And he's made people like me, even though I'm not much younger than him, dream of being in a position like that because he's taken digital art to museums. So, why Ubu? Does anyone else have a question for why? Because this is why I put it here. If you have why we did this. Okay. Ethically and sustainable. Now, I started off as an architect and got into graphic design. And one thing that is very, very, very certain to me is about ethics. How do you treat another person? A writer stealing from another writer is unethical, but it's easy to find out. But what about art and AI and AI art? Like, how do we explain to a collector the difference between a piece of AI work and someone who collaged the work and someone who did 3D? It's all about education. It's about educating the collectors as well. This is why we're building Ubu. We have people with money that wants to come into the system, but they don't know how to buy art. They don't know who to look at for art. And even another thing, another question. How many of you are artists here? Journalists? Writers? Okay. If we're to think of artists and why they would need a system like this, the most common failure of an artist is your portfolio, your artist statement, and how you're seen. And the network works with one famous person makes another person famous. With writers, vicariously, it's about subscribers and your writing being good. And then we go into like film, which is kind of like our next venture. So with Ubu, we were doing democratized film back in Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Namibia, and we were giving filmmakers a chance to put their stuff on the blockchain. Now, film is a very, very, very special thing to my heart because we're getting so much information through streaming that we're no longer looking at the art of film. Like we're no longer saying, "Oh wow, I learned something from this." And there are a lot of people that have adding value to like society, like documentaries. Like you thinking about these case by case situations where you need to go and preserve something to make sure in the future it doesn't get changed. Because does anyone know what the Mandela effect is? Yeah. So it is knowing something, reading about it, but questioning yourself on whether it is true. Has that ever happened to you? Like, oh, I thought it was spelt this way, or the logo looked like this way. This is why we're doing it, because you cannot have a Mandela effect if it is permanent, because we've seen throughout society people have changed history. This is impossible. This is the whole idea of what we're doing. Not through with blockchain and with Ubu, because you're wondering who's safeguarding it. It's the people that want to protect it. It's people like me, there's loads of people, my co-founders, and loads of artists in the space, because the reason I gave you the number 50, those are 50 new people. It's not about the established people. That their job is to do what I'm doing right now and have like a fair ecosystem. So, platforms, that's the thing that a lot of people wonder with an NFT, and how do you get to it? So, in its own way, Instagram is a platform, but you don't get money, but galleries and services that you get from the gallery or the idea, that is what we want to do. We want to serve the people before we actually get the platform. The main discourse comes from, I can give as an example because they're closed now. There was a site called Maker's Place. They're probably one of the most famous. If you know about the Beeple sale that happened for 63 million, or was it 68 million, a few years ago, that was the company that did the sale. But they closed down 3 or 4 months ago. Why did that happen? Like, no level of sustainability. You're thinking an art market could have been held by one guy, but there were several markets that popped up at the same time. They created a competitive culture. And the thing about Maker's Place was, for you to join it, you needed to, there was an app called Civic. You needed to go and register all your information, put your government information, and go and join. In comparison to Foundation, you create a wallet and you're anonymous. So there are people that are willing to give up their identity to go and make money, and there are some which are trying to protect it. And that's the key thing about blockchain. It's about, do you want to be known? So for me, I'm very, very fortunate. I was told by the curator to use real world examples. Like, I'm very, very fortunate that downstairs I'm vintage Mozart, but I get to talk to you as Liam Vries. I'm very, very lucky that I get to split my identity, but some artists, they are branded as that one individual. And the reason I did that is because I don't want to be known as a teacher. That's far from what I do. Like Liam, the person who pays rent, does all of those things. But as like vintage Mozart, I do want to enjoy the other parallels of life, like being something else. That's the idea of the internet. And when you go and look at our, I'm not going to call it a mental health crisis, but I would say what's plaguing Gen Z and the younger generations being online frequently, and even with blockchain, is the pressure of having to succeed. It's never come more now more than ever because everyone has a new idea and everything is coming faster. So what do you focus on? Because I asked in the audience, like when we finished, like, what do you guys do? And my goal is to help you use the blockchain for whatever your job is, because there's so many systematic ways on doing these things. Right. There was someone who mentioned something outside, and this is something I care about: protecting culture before capital. Now, this leads into a story. I better check what I'm doing on time. Oh, okay, we're doing good. This leads into a story about me coming from Zimbabwe as well. This is also going into the why. So Zimbabwe was colonized by England, and we only got independence in 1980. So it's fairly new. We as early as South Africa. But the ripple effects of it resulted in my country not having a national dress. The small little things of not having identity, where it gets stripped away from you through colonialism, and we're now in a situation where Sally Mugabe was a Ghanaian woman, heavily influenced the fashion in Zimbabwe. So it brought some humility to it, because even any picture I looked at my granddad, he was always dressed like the gentleman over there, like in a suit, white shirt, kind of common. That's how it was saying, always having demure. Even in his old age, that was his entire life and that was his identity. And then we came into the era of people having dreadlocks, to people like myself having jewelry, which was kind of like seen taboo. But we do wonder, is culture more of a feeling, or is it more of a systematic thing that we pass down to one another? And what do we protect? So when we build blockchain culture, the whole idea of Ubu is I am because we are. The moment you get into the Discord server, you're as important as a grain of sand on the beach, because every single person's a grain of sand. And the only way we're going to make a beach is by having many people explore their ideas. If we look at the commonality of the system on why we're struggling on the internet, everyone is trying to sell things to one another, but no one is asking, hey, how do you do what you do? No one is curious. We're just at that stage of trying to elevate to the next level because everyone is recording themselves doing it. So that's why I mentioned Gen Z, TikTok, all of these things. When I was growing up as an artist, I did not need to prove how I made my art. With the rise of AI, every single thing you do is being questioned, even writing. But it's up to you as a person to meet a community where you're now sustainable, like, oh, I want to be a creative, I want to be surrounded by these people. That's what helps you build in the system. Not chasing traders as a prime example, which is the commonality, but more of chasing people that work with you. Now, how can NFTs support creativity without improvising or distorting it? Right. Is there anyone who'd like to take a question or try and answer from what we're like seeing in front? So I already have an answer for this on supporting creativity and the word without impoverishing or distorting it. Now, the impoverishing part came in the ecosystem. I can give a case study of 2022 where I mentioned gas. So we're going back to the gas topic. I hope you're all paying attention. Gas fluctuates according to how busy it is. So if a transaction needs to happen, just picture three of you in a queue, it's going to take far longer for you to pay in a supermarket, right, compared to by yourself with self-service. Now imagine every single person wants to buy an item all at the same time. I, as the store person, will just increase the prices of my goods so I can reduce the people. So that's the whole idea of gas, but now we're knowing how we're impoverishing and distorting us. So the example I'm using was like in Southern Africa, we got to a situation where to mint an NFT was like $90, 95. This is like peak. But artists were selling their work for like $120. So they were in the $120 market and they did not know they were losing money because the gallery is taking money from you. Don't forget that, the 15%. So that's why I said to you in the beginning, what are you putting? Does it have meaning? Because we had situations where people were burning resources just for the gain of getting something they couldn't accomplish. There is hope though. We've gone so far through the system that we have now layer twos. So that's a little bit of a big deep dive, and that's why I'll leave the QR code for like the Instagram so you can actually read about this, because layer twos is a more of a complicated situation. That it's a cheaper way to do the exact same thing, but you can bring your stuff back up. I'm not exactly too sure why L2s were made besides it being cheaper and faster, as they claim. But there is proof in the pudding with what Base have done and Zora and how they're supporting people on the continent, like Base Africa. So, supporting creativity, Base Africa is doing this incredible thing, and we've worked with them with Ubu, and I'm going to use them because we did a World Pizza Day. It happens every Bitcoin Pizza Day as the anniversary, and we worked with Base and we did a fun run. So we were trying to have the idea of how do we encourage fitness at the same time with blockchain whilst feeding the people, because we were feeding them unhealthy food. We don't want to encourage that. This all comes down to without distorting it, because what was our goal? Our goal wasn't to go and take photographs. Our goal was to make people learn about Pizza Day, why it's important, but you also got fed. But think of a situation where how many people just came for the food. That's why we made them run. There were so many conditions that if you stayed, you earned your pizza, correct? And at the end of it, we gave them $5 in base. So they got to get money, got to mint their NFTs, and got to go and experience in a layer two thing. When we were 5 years ago, minting for $5 would be insane. Like that wasn't like a thing. We were minting for like 300-400 United States dollars during the pandemic, but the money was coming back because pieces were selling close to $2,000 to $3,000 because there were people that were pouring money into the system. And now we're in a situation where the world economic situation, blockchain, interlinked. You need people investing in it in order for there to be liquidity. We're having a liquidity problem. People are protecting the assets that they have, because if you buy a painting, I'm going to give it as an example, Sam Spratt. The idea of an NFT is, I will use you two as an example. I buy her work from her, but what happens if I want to sell it? I have the opportunity, but just picture it's a handbag. I now need to find someone who values the handbag or anything, but if it's an NFT, I just put it up, it's on the marketplace, and if she's already interesting and her work is interesting, it already translates to the next person. But the cool thing about it is, every single person is on the receipt. And if you sell it to her, it'll also be known. And now with layer twos, I love the technology that we're even calling it a circular economy. The person in between, the platform is getting money, the person like myself for purchasing it, and she's getting money. So they are rewarding people for using their systems now. That's how far advanced we've gone because they're trying to keep you online, on the screen, using the tech. But how do we use the tech? Remember our first question that it is a tool. That is the very, very, very key thing. I think I walked through this on walking through hype-driven narratives, and this is kind of like what spoiled the space with everyone going in. Don't worry, we're going to get to the other stuff about like learning, but I wanted to warm you guys up so you could understand the universe because it's very unfortunate. I made this presentation just in case you have never been familiar with the topic because it is overwhelming. It feels like Microsoft Excel that you're learning for the first time, and there's just everything in front of you. But the reality is, how you treat your Instagram, as an example. You don't just post any random picture. You think about what you're going to post, when you're going to post, how you're going to post it. Are you being intentional? Or even TikTok, how are we bringing out this type of information? Sorry? Yeah, precisely. And do you have a question? No, thanks for putting on that. So, if we're to think about ethics and responsibility after what I've said, and I hope someone can answer me, does anyone think what could be unethical in the space? Just dig deep. I would love to know, because I would love to know like understanding. Like just think in a real world thing, like how would you say, hey, this is wrong. This is unethical because we've got facts. How can you do it? Because you do see fraud happening like in the space. You've seen money laundering through art. But what is the ethics behind it? Is it the person who's purchasing it or is it the person who is selling it? That's the other thing you now need to start thinking about. Because I could be an artist, sell for $100,000 to a criminal, whose responsibility is? Because in the normal day and world, that money is tracked. Stolen money cannot be kept. That is a very, very key thing. Now, please don't take this about what I'm saying. You need to understand that this is ungoverned. So the same way you can take money from someone, someone can take money from you. So it's the Wild West in the sense of your wallet, your keys, your crypto. So think about you are your own bank account, you are your own person, but you're also responsible for what you're introducing to the ecosystem. So like for today, I would love to have a situation where at least half of you would go and say, hey, I heard about this thing called Ubu, go and read about this. We put it in many platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Zora, so we can get people to learn. Even if they don't want to, they can always go back to it because everyone does. And I really, really wish there were more people doing that when I was younger. That was the key catalyst. But I was so fortunate, forgive me for what I'm about to say, I was so fortunate the pandemic happened. It gave me time to spend time with myself. I had to read every day, I had to make myself busy, and that's kind of how I got into the blockchain. So all the hours, I got to spend them, and I got to make these mistakes by myself. And fortunately, the mistakes are now cheaper in comparison to the older days. Okay, so we're now going to our first topic on artwork traceability. I think I talked to you guys about the, oh, I should have got water, the first 4 topics, but I'm going to speak from an artist's perspective, and when you think about losing attribution, this is probably one of the biggest commonalities that painters go through. Because as you get older, you either are gaining skill or you're losing it. A lot of people don't understand that demographic of I can only speak as an artist. And works circulating without the artist's consent. So now we're getting into, please, continue. So if we had to go to artist consent, I'm going to give you a real case example. When you're on Instagram and someone shares your stuff into their stories, how do you feel about it? Like, that's the bigger question. Like, consent, the barrier of consent. If someone is not your friend and they post your work and they're making money off that. Is that correct? This is the boundary of ethics. And we've seen so many pages on platforms where people are making money off people simply YouTube. Perfect example is football highlights, if you're a football fan. Those people are literally, players are playing, they're being filmed. Companies that are filming with the camera are there with employees, but some guy goes, downloads the video, puts his logo, and then uploads it on his channel faster than the next person in a different language or even in a different speed. And I think the most common one is when they reverse the video so that you can see it in an opposite direction. Now, how ethical is that in like our normal society and how we're using the technology? So, with NFTs, answering our first question, the four main points are artist identity, creation date, ownership, and the exhibition history. So, going into exhibition history, like myself right now, Transient Labs have an incredible thing where you can make your piece travel. So as an example, the pieces that are there, I've not minted a piece in Africa in years. I'm going to mint it here. If it sells, praise the Lord, like that kind of like happens. But I can now add provenance if I do another show, and let's say I take those pieces to Brazil. On the blockchain, I can prove to people and say it was transferred, gone to nothing happening. I can make notes. So when a collector in the future, let's say 5, 10 years from now, they can know the history of the artwork, and this is what museums have been struggling with. Because you're basing it on the curator telling you, oh, this painting is from 200 years ago. How do you know? We question so many things, like, as an example, we now in the 21st century where we can now start questioning architecture. You go and look at a building and they claim it's in the 1900s, but the one next to it is from the 1800s. And you wondered why people would leave a big block of space, yet they're the same design. Is everyone following me? Yeah, it gets very, very deep when you think about it, about what ethics is and what we do to one another. When you go and look at, I'm going to give another real case example, the car industry. I think the most common car I've seen copied now is like the Range Rover. I've seen every single company branded in a different way. Even here, I like looked at different vehicles and how they are copying one another and being a simulation. But when you have no originality, you result in a society where you have a lot of white cars and black cars. Not because white and black are the colors to choose, it's because it's the cheapest thing for manufacturers. So when you see like something colored differently, your brain already thinks like, oh wow, the same feeling, I'm going to relate to that in a museum. When you go to a piece like the Mona Lisa, for those of you who have been to the Louvre, I was shocked how small it was. That was my first thing, not how it looked. And then I was also shocked at how many people worked on it. They claimed several painters throughout the history, it being stripped. But then it came into my mind, like, how do I know this is not a lie? This is not beneath another human going to go and protect another artist or go and make someone else's legacy. We've seen this throughout society where Christopher Columbus took credit of going to America, but ended up in the West Indies, and he thought he was going to India, opposite direction. These are true realities that got brought up, but now they get painted over with lies. Now, that is the whole idea of what we're trying to do. Okay, so I'm glad I remembered this. This is one of my most important points. It doesn't stop copying. Even I've been copied on the blockchain. As I said, it's preserving truth and authorship. So I will give a small story of myself where I was involved in a situation where an artist copied my work. They actually put it in AI. And I don't know why the universe put us next to one another in the exact same curation. And our works were side by side, and I get a nice message from a collector saying, when did you start doing animals? I'm happy you did this, because it's the same style, but he did an animal and I'm in humans. But I was like, I didn't do an animal. I saw the work, and I was like, oh, and this is the first stages of AI. We're talking very early. And I didn't know whether it hurt my feelings or it hurt my ego that you're smarter than me at my own game. Because he made my work faster, put it next to mine, and still proved that you could get. That's the whole idea of being an artist. That's why I said focusing on money could put you into a spiral of always asking the why. But the more important thing is the what. So if you're going to, because before we go into the next topic, I will ask if you guys want to take questions. These 4 points build your foundation on how you'll never be accused of plagiarism, being a common term in crypto, being a grifter, being a scammer. So where do ethics start from? From rules. Hence, I am because we are. You would not treat your neighbor badly if you do not want your neighbor to treat you badly. So the specific reason of Ubu is inviting creatives and soul people and not outsiders. The collectors and all of that, it comes afterwards. But it's more about, hey, how can you build a chat with people, go in and talk? And with Discord, the pleasing thing about why we're embracing it is we want to have a situation where we can have moderators of different languages with their own people, but we give them the material because material is everything. It takes you about, 21 days to learn a habit. So if you continue practicing this and you do it in real time, you now become an expert of it, and then you go and explain the idea to the next person. Right. Another question I will leave open if anyone wants to answer. Who controls African culture in the digital space? So we're over 50 plus nations, but who speaks for African identity? That's quite a monolithic term when you have to go and say, like, what is African identity? Because we have the African Union, correct? Like most of us are member states, but inside the African Union, you have ECOWAS. What is the union? I'm pretty sure in North Africa. Do you guys have like a union of countries? Excuse me? Yes, as an example. So, like in Southern Africa, we have SADC, and in East Africa, you have something else. But why do we have all these separate organizations if we have the African Union? That's a very, very big question, because if we're all going under the same identity, why do we have prejudice, xenophobia, borders, visas, like in our continent in particular? So when we're going into Web3, why must we now have borders again? Like, why must you limit yourself as a creative just because you can't speak another language? And that's the idea. And where AI comes into it. Because now, for the first time in history, you don't need to speak English. You don't need to speak French. You don't need to speak any language because you can just translate it. And AI is assisting, because the idea of AI is not writing for you, is getting your message across. That's why I asked. Yes, please, ma'am.
Like a lot of information, so I'm kind of confused. Actually, I'm not Moroccan, I'm Italian, so maybe I make questions on the other side. First of all, why just African? Or you think you start with African culture, but in the future can be open to the African, Italian, or... okay, so the first question. The second question is about the symbol of African culture. For example, I'm a art dresser. I mean, I can make dress. I'm here in Morocco, and I fall in love with the Moroccan culture. So I start making like a kaftan fusion. So I can use this part of Moroccan culture. So it's normally that I will use part of this. Yeah, of course. I what? I think it's we take and we give. It,
So if you came down here and you did fashion and you did fashion shows, then you imported the Italian models, and you did it all here, and then you hired Italian people, you get your money and you give them all a ticket. But then nothing goes back to What was your first question?
for now, you talk about like African culture. So
Oh, why? Okay. So, linking into the why. I'm African. I'm not European. I cannot go and speak on cultures I'm not familiar with. You don't cook food you're not familiar with. That is the most important thing. You don't make yourself comfortable in someone's house that you do not know. Like me coming here to Morocco, it was a little bit of a build-up. I first went to Senegal. That was my first time in West Africa, like climbing the African map, introducing myself into culture, talking to my friends, like preparing. So for yourself, it's not really limited because the idea of Ubu is Africa to the world. This is the next stage because I started the African NFT community, and our biggest discourse was, funny enough, Black Americans, because they are craving identity. And when I talk about Black Americans, I mean people coming from foundations of slavery rather than immigrants of African descent that have gone and settled there. Those are two different stories because it's two different struggles. Now, you're wondering how we can culturally appropriate. So I will not use your example. I can give an example of how African people can appropriate American culture because we go there, we learn about that identity, and we try and reintroduce that into our system. So if you're doing that and trying to change Moroccan fashion, that's far more different than from you getting elements from the people. Did I answer your question? Yes. Okay, let's pick up a film, Black Panther. I will start off by saying I love Ryan Coogler, since this is on record. I love Yatasha Womack. I am an Afrofuturist. But we had a situation where we had a film where we had Danai Gurira, who's from Zimbabwe, my country, speaking Zulu, a language that is not hers. We had several people mispronouncing words. We had several actors that did not know what symbols they were wearing, what culture, the patterns. And they made an Afrofuturistic masterpiece, but with so many cultural blends. Like I saw in the Moroccan airport, I'm not too sure what language that is. It's different from, I'm very beautiful looking, but very similar to the film. If you guys watched it, like the identity of it, like I wasn't similar to like reading it. I was like, wow, this looks really cool. But imagine myself as an African and taking it to Europe and showcasing it to people about how amazing it is. But you're extorting and appropriating a language and a culture. It gets far deep in that. People don't see problems in that, but it's the equivalent of having a Chinese tattoo and you can't read Cantonese or Mandarin. You really don't really know what's on your body. And we've seen several cases on the internet where people do things like that, or getting Maori tattoos. It all comes into it like symbolism. Symbolism belongs to nativity. Every single culture has their own level of symbolism and nativity. And it is important for you as like like in Italian culture, there's so many beautiful aspects of the culture that have come down to like the coffee culture, for example. That has like explored the world, but I remembered my Italian friend telling me how to drink an espresso, like in the morning, the times when you drink coffee, or even like having siestas. Those things are not seen as common in like in other cultures, but if you try and introduce them, a siesta in Southern Africa is seen as laziness. Like, what do you mean you're ending work at 3 p.m.? That kind of stuff. What do you mean you're relaxing? So it really depends on like subcultures. So the whole symbolism, to answer your question, is like we shouldn't be extracting things. We should be building upon them. So in an ideal situation, you would come down and rather work with fashion designers and teach them better methods on improving there, and then you can work with them. But as long as you're here, it doesn't become appropriation. It becomes appropriation the moment you leave and you don't return. You've got your knowledge and you've left. A prime example is museums. The Benin bronzes. We're still in debate on returning artifacts that we know are stolen because they're in museums, and the museums are saying, you guys can't look after your stuff. That's not right. You're having someone telling you about your culture and how you can't preserve it. What gives you the right? Which led us into who controls African culture in the digital space. I hope I answered your question. And I answered the question right there with a few sentences. If you had to talk about retaining control over context, going back to your question, ma'am, it's more about how does the person giving you knowledge feel. It's like grandma's cookbook, and then someone makes a restaurant and they start making money off it. Does grandma get money? Most of the time, no. But grandma's recipes now become famous. We've seen these real life situations where people have invented ideas and have just been extorted and gone to the extreme level. Have I answered your question? Yes, it is difficult, but this is how we start. Okay, even afterwards you can come back to it and we can have like, so, because we're on time. So, okay, sorry. So, my main point, yes, let me come to you. I think I should just come to people, the mic.
Thank you. About the last question, who controls African culture in the web, right? In the digital world? Well, I guess that it's not controlled, and that's why our African culture didn't use the power. We didn't use the power of it yet, or we didn't get all of it or half of it, because by living and experimenting things and yeah. So
I'll ask you another question.
yeah.
Is there an African app that we all use?
I wish so. That's my question. Is the NFT block is the answer of this question?
Yes.
Okay.
So, doubling down on the question, with NFTs, there is no specific place you're going to. Anyone here can make a marketplace. Any single person. Now, any single person can open a supermarket. Selling now becomes a whole different thing. So we have loads of opportunity, but what are you doing with the opportunity? So if I had to ask, like African art, like how it's been, or even like, do we own it? That is far from the truth because we donate all our data to all of these Web2 apps, like as a prime example, like Instagram and them. When you go and think about the data gate that happened, when people's data was leaked and we started going into like advertising, how did it make you feel that someone took your interests and used it for advertisers? That can't happen in Web3 because there's no one in the background doing that. There's no one having their job. That's the whole idea about it. Because it's so painful, I remembered when you'd see an ad about something you like and you're wondering, how did we get there? Where your feed is so curated that your wallet matches your feed. It always comes in the right time. The way the ad is, it just seeps into you. So it's not coming to the state of understanding. It's more of like diluted brainwashing of what the system has come, because we're so used to having these things. Like no one has questioned Mark Zuckerberg ethically. He lost a lot of people's data. American Congress went and processed him. But did our governments do that? Because we were part of it. We are very, very, very much part of contributing to it. And when you look at like Africa, the excuses are always there, but we keep improving. When there was no electricity, we got it. When there was no internet, we got it. Now that we are there at the same level playing field, do you feel you have the same opportunity when you post on Instagram as someone is in the US? Now that you have to pay, because now you have to pay for attention. Now you need a credit card. Now you need a job. Now you need all of these things. So they're bringing in all of these hurdles. And whereas the blockchain, there is nothing. It is you, yourself, and your ethics. That's why I was doubling down on like why ethics are such an important thing, because you do not want to lose yourself. You do not want to find yourself in a situation where you could steal. That is something important. And I'm not talking about money, identity, someone's idea. And it's such a pity because like I was asking about writers, because the most theft that does happen is from writers. And it's the saddest thing because those are the people that keep us alive as humans, like books, those types of things. But who promotes the writers? When you go and you look at the narrative, everyone in here has definitely read a book. But how come we have so many New York best time sellers? You can see 3 of them in a row and they can be in the same year. So who is giving these facts? Where can we check these facts? These are the questions of the blockchain, because if these sales were real, why can't I just go and click and go and see how well this person is doing? And this all came from, if you had to really rewind, the music industry. The music industry is probably one of the fakest industries that you've seen, where people were buying albums of artists. You had governments buying to make musicians famous. It happens all around the world. They do that, the musician gets famous, and before you had hard copy CDs, so you could know the amount of hard copy CDs versus the amount sold. But as we got into streaming, how are musicians making money? Because we do know people are listening to music less. So now when we go into Web3 streaming, there are platforms, people are earning money to watch while the platform is being paid. It sounds like that's why I said joining Uber and everything, but the tech is there, but it's just so overcomplicated explaining to people at this current moment in time, because there's so much fear. In Morocco, do you have contactless yet? Tap to pay? Yeah. Are you saying, of course? I would say only South Africa has it, in Southern Africa. There are European countries, like Ireland, going on the bus. You can't tap the thing, you still have to use coins. For Gen Zs, that's the most inconvenient thing, because you guys are used to Apple Pay, clicking your wallet, everything. But for parents, grandparents, they still know how to write a check. Now, if you had to go and ask your grandparents about the security of a check, that someone wrote a number on a piece of paper, signed it, gave it to another person, and they took it to the bank, and that person trusted you that their money was inside there. Because you could write a check on a Friday, let it go on the weekend, and then you know you're getting on a Monday, you buy yourself 2 days. Right? If you're following that analogy. But that's how you got to follow like the system. We've already started at an unfair advantage by having limitations. So now we're catching up, but how do we catch up? Because this is fair. You cannot rig this. Like, if you're famous in Web3, there's a reason. It's either your work is good, you're adding value to the system, both. And some people gain knowledge from the system, which is far more important than adding value to it. Like for myself, as a person, I didn't have internet friends. I had fans of my artwork, but I really wanted to connect to artists from like around Africa. And ma'am, to answer your question, that is like my whole goal. That's why I started the African NFT community. But if you read that title and you weren't African, how would you join? The idea of Africanness, like where we are so racially diverse that we have immigrants in Africa that don't feel African, but won't want to identify with it. Let me go to my... Okay. I'm glad we had questions, because now we're getting... It's such a pity because she had a question relating to it. Pumping and dumping of NFT projects. So this is why we're talking about ethics. So I'm going to paint a scenario. Imagine no one walks into this room, and then I sell an item, and you all buy it. But the moment that person goes into this room, the price increases, but all of you keep quiet. Now imagine all the chairs fill up, and now you know 50% capacity, and now you know it is triple the price. So you guys go and you leave the room, and you dump them. But you go into the next room with your money, and you go and tell those guys to come in here. Now you're wondering, why are you telling those guys? Because you're going to come back into the room with your same money, because don't forget, the moment you dumped, the value went down and they lost. They're hoping for someone else to come and level the field. You come in and now the room went from 1/3 to 2/3 to a full room. So now the full room, all of you have 2/3 of the money and no one else knew it because you were here first. And that is exactly what happens in the space. How early you are. So when I say don't go and cling for money, there are so many situations I go, oh, look at this project, it's doing well. But there are people who are following the project for 6-7 months, waiting for that moment, taking interest, doing their research. That is more important than actually just going into the room, because the room is what controls the narrative. And in the space, especially like with artists, we got into a situation where we found a way to make money. We were getting famous from it, but it was no longer becoming sustainable because we were creating faster than we were being purchased. The demand was there at one time, but the demand decreased over time. Collectors decreased, but what the collectors did is the fish that continued, those are their prized possessions and they continue collecting from them. But it is like an unfair handshake of continue creating high quality art or I stop buying from you. Now, does that sound fair? No, but that's business. That is the key principle of business. Is your product good? If your product stops being good, people stop coming into it. So that goes into the business aspect of it, and that goes into yourself as a person. If you're always in a Discord server asking people for help and never giving help, never giving information, you're just a person absorbing stuff. You're now becoming a settler in the room. And that's why I was asking questions, like if I'm speaking too fast, because it is very technical stuff, but it's technical to us, like us as people. That's the core topic of why we're talking today. Because you as a person, how do you want to be perceived on chain? We already know how we're perceived on the internet, especially the Me Too movement that happened for millennials and cancel culture of people being outed for abusive language and behavior. Because that happened, Gen Zs behaved. Gen Zs don't behave reckless on the internet because they understand what a digital footprint is, how harmful it could be, how you cannot get a job because you said something about someone 15 years ago. Now, some may say, oh, you've grown, but that's not the important thing. Bigotry should never be rewarded. At the end of the day, you cannot improve society. So that's our whole goal. How about we create incubators where people understand the laws, the rules, and where we now know the line between appropriation and appreciation. It's a very, very, very good boundary of mutual respect. But the moment we start using our fellow man or lady, that's when it becomes wrong. And that was kind of like the demise of the system. Okay, cultural symbols used for hypes. So I'm glad you asked that question because I have to use myself as an example. I don't have my artwork here, but like the art pieces there, I use like a lot of cultural symbols in my work from places around the world and using topography. And your question is like appropriating and like how do we identify? So for myself, I had to learn over years from like my housemate. He was a lot of hieroglyphics, and that's what I was into. He was an Egyptian guy, and his dad was a professor. And I said to him, I really want to connect as an African. What is the most appropriate way I can use this in my work? And the best advice he gave to me is like learn so that you learn that you're not annoying people. You're not making a mockery of things. Like the lady was singing the national anthem as we like started. The most important thing was a gentleman. He tapped me on my chest to alert me to keep quiet because we were talking. And that level of respect is kind of like what we need in the space where I'm not being offended, like, why are you telling me to keep quiet? I immediately knew I need to pay attention to the most important thing because I'm not at home. That's the most important thing. And even in my country, it would be the exact same way. So how do we actually create this culture? Simply through education at every single level. Whether the person is a Gen X, a millennial, or Gen Z, there are boomers that are in blockchain. But when I say Gen Xers, a lot of them have the skepticism because they went through the global financial crisis in 2008. They went through global financial crises in 98. So a lot of them are affected. And then the older millennial kids remember that. So when the blockchain came up, there is a little bit of skepticism and how. And then Gen Z looks at millennials like, if it's so good, why don't you have all the money in the world? Why didn't you buy all the Bitcoin in the world? Skepticism, because our parents were telling us, hey, it's so high risk to go and put this because the banking system was security. So when we look at the limits and speculative abuses, I'm just going into theories of what's going to happen with bank accounts and all of this other kind of stuff, because it's the inevitable of us having digital currency. I'm pretty sure in Morocco you have a digitized version of your money. Like everywhere around in Africa, I've noticed where you can send money, right? Or data to one another. That is literally the first stage of blockchain. That is literally the first stage. It's just with SIM cards. I'm sure there's apps. The same way with Uber. You got rid of the taxi driver, but you got to employ a driver who was willing enough to make money at a different hour and at a different rate. That's where the taxi driver failed, because they wanted to meter you, because their rates are determined by fuel costs. I don't know how much fuel costs in Morocco, but they're charging you distance over time, whereas an Uber is charging you a journey. You can go and say to your friends, oh, it's like $5, it's like $10. But with the metered taxi, it's such a totally different situation. So that's the way, the type of questions and the mechanics we need to ask. Now, the environmental and financial harm. This is very, very important for me to actually speak about this as an environmentalist. It is damaging to the environment, but I flew here on an aeroplane, so who am I to talk about an environment? That's my answer to that. So if anyone questions you about the technology, just think about how we live. Like, how do we live? And do you have that much influence on the environment? My favorite example whenever I speak is about Taylor Swift, if you're familiar with her. She made, I think it was 37 flights in a month in the state of Texas. This is in the same state. This is not going internationally on a private jet. But you'll be told in Africa how we're damaging the ozone layer with our cars and everything. But you can count the people that own private jets in Africa. You can count these types of things like airports, facilities. So when we look at speculation and limits, how do we limit our imagination for bad? So the idea behind it is protecting yourself. Like, we are not going to get to that stage. If you're talking to your friend, you're not going to think your friend is going to commit fraud against you. That's a very key thing. And if you're around like-minded people, you change. Culture starts from people, not from words. It's about how you're treated, or like how you're staying, or whether you're interested in this. That's what really determines it. Okay. This is something so important to me on education over monetization, because money knowledge is something that is not passed on. Unfortunately, is there anyone who's a banker here in finance? Finance? Is anyone here in finance, banking? Okay. So, second question, real question. How many of you have been taught finance by your parents? All ages. Please raise your hands. I would love to have have you been taught finance? How to do checking, savings, all of that. Have your parents taught you any of that? They've taught you that. Okay. How many people do you know have financial knowledge? Because we've all been in a situation where we always have a friend. For some reason, even if they have a job, they never have money. Like, we all know someone like that. Like, how? What are you doing? Like, we do the same job. And financial literacy comes with education, because the dangers of the blockchain was, I'm thinking what Owen said, fool's gold. There was a situation in 2022 where there was a bigger collector base than the artist base. Artists were in demand versus collectors. And I would like to call junior level artists. I like to think we are junior, mid, and high level. Now, for myself, I would like to think I'm mid to high, because I keep falling off the ladder. That's the way I kind of like look at it. Like falling off the ladder of high, going into low. And it's a different struggle to being at the bottom, because at the bottom, there's no expectations. So now imagine you have no expectations and $10,000 is dropped on your lap. That happened to several people. It changed the ecosystem, because you now got to see the fully fledged characters of people with how they behave with money, what they do with money. Some went and bought their friends' work, some built ecosystems, and some people created projects that drugged people to make more money, and some just lost their money. So the educative part about it is the transparency over hype. That, like FOMO, if anyone has heard that term for, FOMO, fear of missing out. That is probably the thing that, yes, you can write that down. DYOR is do your own research, and FOMO. Those are probably the most important words you'll hear in Web3, because do your own research, because no one is going to say, no one cares if you got scammed. And FOMO, why do you feel you need to go to a party you're not invited to? That's how you lose money, because you keep going to them. And some of us have learned this the hard way. I'm talking from experience of trying to network with people that did not care about what I did. So you spend money, you try and impress them, you try and get into the door, and then in the end, you're burying yourself and you're not building. And that's a very, very key, important part about it. Now, turning the culture into a casino, and sometimes the most ethical choice is not to mint. So I was talking about layer twos earlier. Before I go on to this tangent, does anyone have a question? So, layer twos, we're all familiar with Instagram, and I'll have to pull out my phone to give you as an example. Okay. Sorry, I have to pull out my phone because I can't show you IRL, and I guess people would have to see. Oh, there's no internet here. So, Zora as an app. Picture Instagram, but with crypto. They have created, I don't know how to describe this to you, but picture I have apples, right? And every single time you mint an NFT on Instagram, you get an apple, right? But every apple you get an orange. Now you can trade those oranges for apples. Don't ask where the oranges come from. That's layer twos. Get it? Okay. Money. Should we go to a real world thing? Money. The United States of America prints out 700 billion, I think, a year. Do you think they make 700 billion in cash or they have gold reserves of 700 billion? There you go. Apples and oranges. So the apple metaphor is Ethereum, which is the currency that everyone is familiar with, but Zora is on Ethereum. Now, if you build a currency off a currency, exactly, that goes to that cash app that you have here, that digital money that you send to one another. So that digital money that you have here in Morocco, in Zimbabwe, you have a thing called EcoCash. I think in West Africa, most people use mobile money, like mobile money apps. That's the blockchain, probably at a lower level. But here's the bigger question. What's the mobile money app here in Morocco? Excuse me? No, the mobile money app. Yes, like, can't you send money to one? Okay, so I will give you a tiered system. So in Southern Africa, EcoBank, which is kind of common, they have a thing called EcoCash. EcoCash is linked to EcoBank, but it is mobile money that is attached to your cell phone number. So the only way you can put money in is you take $100, you go to the teller, and then they type it in, if they do. Now, what's stopping EcoCash from just putting numbers? Has anyone ever thought of that? What's stopping them? That's why we have blockchain. You just can't make money. It's impossible. So do you now get apples and oranges? So Zora, every single time you mint an NFT, and let's just say someone buys something from you, Zora reward you for using their app. Connect enough Zora orbs, you can trade that money for real money. This is like real-time thing because they are paying people to use their app, but at what cost? 50%. Now you're saying 50% is a lot. What does Instagram pay you? Nothing. Super Rare only takes 15%. So we got to a situation where we now have what I would like to call our cultural casino. Now, it's become a cultural casino because these apps are social media apps where you are investing in creators rather than the art. So picture a situation of you two gentlemen over here. I put $50 and I put $50 on you. And I am hoping you continue making art because as you continue making art, you're on the stock market. So more people keep investing in you. We're not buying work from you. So the catch is, as Evan quote on, the thing with Zora, people can pull their money out at any time. It's all about liquidity. So let's go back to the first example of the room. We go and hype up vintage Mozart. I will use you, sir, as an example. You bring me to an event. You tell about 500 of your friends what a fantastic artist I am. You tell them, go and give $1. And then my market cap is now $500. Let's just think of that. Like, we'll use a small example. But what happens when 250 people come in and the first 500, they're holding, and then the market increases to 1,000? It's 2x now. It becomes 3x. We're now in the thousands. Who are the first primary gamers? In a pyramid scheme, the first person who enters the scheme wins, right? And that is exactly what it is, but with social media. So with Zora, what we're doing is helping people get on chain, but telling them, these are your friends and these are not people to make money. Because just remember, the more your market value stays, just like real world stuff, if your market value is high, you don't need to sell. It's just coming in. Because remember, you're getting oranges instead of apples. So now if you sell all your apples, you got no oranges or anything, and you're now back down to zero. But now imagine a situation where 500 people invested in you to help your career and you just take their money and leave, no explanation. So this is a real world example of ethics. We should never get ourselves into a situation like that. Okay. Okay, nothing about us without us. Thank you. Thank you for attending. So we should help Africa tell its own stories and not export them. So when I came here, I learned about Amazigh culture. And the first thing when I walked in the airport, I was just impressed by the symbols. It reminded me of Black Panther. I was like, wow, I can't read this. Like, I couldn't like read it. I find it very interesting that people here have to read Arabic and that, which is a whole different skill set compared to reading in the phonetic or Roman alphabets, because that's what everywhere around the world is, your flight tickets, your keyboards. Not everyone. Stop the recording.
Even Amazigh people doesn't read it. Like they speak with it. It's their language. They don't know how to talk in Arabic in Darija, the dialect, but they speak just Amazigh, and they don't know. Like I don't know how they write it, but old people, the Amazigh, they don't read the Berber, yeah.
So that as a real world example is like incredible, because we now have a situation where handwriting could be potentially lost. People can't read it, and I don't think Gen Z is like interested unless you're interested in it. So look at how the blockchain could literally save those letters, and we don't have Egypt all over again. We're wondering, what did they say? Because in my opinion, I'll just to segue, don't you think those are emojis? We communicate in emojis already. Why do we think that culture was beneath having jokes? That's the big thing, and that's what colonialism has done to us, where we're now embarrassed about all our cultures, how we did stuff. For as an example, the most famous pyramids are coming from one country, yet there's several countries with these monuments. And that's the kind of like principle of how we look at like blockchain and NFTs. So I was so happy when I walked through the airport because I saw something where I could ask a question, and it's very, very, very rare in the world where you don't see a language that you can't read. It's very, 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 very rare. Everyone is familiar with Arabic and all these other languages that are using Cyrillic alphabets, but that was an amazing experience for me because I was so curious, like, how can I add this to my art? That's all I was thinking. It's like, this is so beautiful. Like, looking at it on clothing, it made me even prouder to be an African, because now I know I don't need to go to hieroglyphics as the only level of symbolism. And as a Zimbabwean, we have something very similar to you guys, like the Great Zimbabwe, the ruins. We had our ancestors that were carving in stone, telling us about animals, how to keep them. So they had a domesticated society, but history is telling us something else because people went and wrote books. This will never happen again. Right, cool. This is, I wanted everyone to kind of like read this, and if you have any questions on why I kept on emphasizing it being a tool. The same way you go and you look at AI is the same way you need to look at the blockchain. It's a tool. We made it. Just never forget that. We made it. The beauty of being a human being is choice. Unlike your animal, if you have dogs, your dog doesn't have a choice. It's obedient to you because you need to feed it. So when we're talking about African art, that's such a monolithic term because we're talking about 54 countries. Like, that is very, very big. Like, AFCON was here, like, was 2 weeks ago. We saw all the nations coming in and play football, but the biggest question I saw was, how come the players are not available for European football? Why don't they pause it? And all of these questions, but the weather is different here. We can't go and play it in the summer. So link that with African art and how we look at ourselves, like we need to start coming in and having a generalized consensus of what we define it to be. Like, so my final point, because I see, if you were there, I just left this up for you to like scan the QR code. This is the Discord server for Ubu. We want to get everyone to have the resources at Bait. Like, think about a situation where you need to ask a question, you need to have something, and that's my whole job. Like right now, we're starting something and we're bringing it to like the next level. I'm just going to give you an example. Right, so this will just be playing in the background, and what we were doing on our Instagram was we created a starter kit for people to learn the blockchain at their own pace. You can find this on the Ubuntu Blockchain Union Instagram, you can find it on the Zora, you can find it on the Twitter, and we pinned it because the idea is there's no right time to learn. There is never a correct time to learn. But we wanted to make learning so simple that big, bold letters, colorful, fun, and have a situation like my target audience is Gen Z. How can I get Gen Z's attention in an era where everyone is just swiping on TikTok and everything? The information needs to look good. It needs to make sense. So I didn't talk about the boring things here today. If you're still interested, I think the Discord server, because everyone is traveling. Once I'm back from Morocco, you can see me in the server, ask any questions. And if you want to have a situation where we're like, we feel uncomfortable, like all is chatting, we can make a channel specifically for you. You can go in and ask those questions. If you go and you tag me, all I just need to do is translate. It's not that hard. We're now in an era where you don't need to force yourself to be uncomfortable, because that's my job. I wanted to think of a way. And my main goal is to get this in as many languages as possible, because this information is free. Liberation is free. That's what we need to think as people. Now, my final thing to show you, right, this just gets a little bit complicated. So remember I told you there's tiers of artists. We do tier Ubu. So we have a thing called an Ubu pass. Now, it does not cost money. It costs time. So you can go on Zora and earn $1 through our steps. We actually got a step on how to earn $1 in crypto for free. To mint this pass is $3. This is including gas, every single thing. But the beauty of this is everything I talked about today, you get to do. Like, you get to do it, making the wallet, getting the access to it, because that is the main problem. I talked so much today, but how much of that information can you use if you're not doing it practical? Because that's what my main hope was. Like, I wanted to get your guys' attention so you could look at it in a different way. And for the people that are watching, hi. But at the same time, how about you go share this with someone? Like, hey, I saw this cool thing, and the website's right there. So when you go and you click on, it'll take you to Transient Labs. So as you can see, I'm giving a real-time blockchain thing. So these are mints. This happened 4 months ago. This was like our test. All the people that you see here are like curated artists. Some of them bought 2, some bought 3, giving you as an example. The idea of the Ubu Pass was, can we get people to actually do it? Start stage 1. Like, can you get someone to actually go in, mint, be interested? That's the most difficult thing. Like, I think about the organizers of this event. The most difficult thing was to get you guys into the room, get me here, get the venue. But once you have that, you just need 2 people, and you've already accomplished your goal. So when you kind of like go into it, the wallet explanation and everything will be given as a rundown, because I didn't want to make the talk about that, because that's your homework. Your homework's already done for you, because you can just go to Ubuntu Blockchain Union, and then like we're using Transient Labs. So a little bit more complicated, because on the blockchain, you can have platform contracts like what the lady was asking earlier. But with Transient Labs, they are a company that makes sure that your contract is sovereign. So the IPFS and the data that you're putting, it's yours. If you use a community contract like OpenSea, they can change the rules, and you don't want that. So you want to have a situation where what can we do with Transient Labs? For one, we can make it unique. This is going to be a public mint for infinity. What do we do with that 0.0003 ETH? That money goes back into the system because we buy people's work. Because my goal is not to make money with this, it's to get more people. Because how does the circular economy work? It is the 500 rule. If everybody's winning and everyone is getting oranges and stop apples, you can now start trading oranges, but your apples remain. You still have your dignity. You're not known as someone who is extorting people, which is such a big thing. There's no ethics lost. So this is the next stage of how you'd want to join Ubu. So the people that are Ubu Pass members, they're in a, if you're familiar with Discord, it's a separate chat. So you need the pass and a wallet to get into it. But everyday people can come into it because you need to see, do I like this? Do I want to do this? Do I want to go through these steps? What do I want to do with this? And all of these questions are very, very important. I am going to talk to the curator and see like the presentation if you'd like, and I can put it as a PDF or even put it as resources so people can come back into this, or if there's anything they don't know, go on Instagram. It's UbuXYZ on Instagram. It's, hold on, let me give you an example. Okay, because this is familiar and this is what I was talking about. We haven't like loaded the Instagram, but if you kind of like see, there's going to be stuff that you'd see that would help you learn more as a person, like example like why Web3, all of this kind of content. So have a look at Ubu XYZ, send a DM, post a question. The next stage is you getting into the Discord. The next stage is you getting into the pass. So you have like a lot of homework to go and accomplish stuff. So are there any final questions before we go? And personally, if you want to give me a follow so I can give you guys context. So you can actually see this is my work and the studies that I do. I go under vintage Mozart. So I'm happy I got to do this, and I'm so happy to those of you who paid attention. I'm now going to end because I now see there's other speakers. Are there any questions finally before we like wrap up about this? Cool, thank you. And thank you everyone who had a question. Thank you to every single person who wrote down and paid attention. And yeah, appreciate you.